You know, as teens, we all have questions about faith and religion, but we've all been too scared to ask. Well, here at 1315, we strive to answer those questions so that you can boldly stand up for your faith in everyday scenarios, like over a cup of coffee. So, grab your coffee mugs and let's dive into today's episode. Dr. Frank Turek is an American Christian author, public speaker, and radio host. He is the author of 2 books, Correct, Not Politically Correct, and Stealing from God, and co-author of 2 more with Norman Geisler, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, as well as Legislating Morality. He hosts a call-in talk show called CrossExamined on American Family Radio, and his television show, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, airs on NRB Network. So, Mr. Turek, I'm so excited to have you on today. It's been long awaited. I'm glad we could get connected.
Well, Caleb, great being on your podcast. And if this is going to post prior to next week, which would be October 12th and 13th, I hope some of your friends will come down to the apologetics conference we're having down here in Charlotte. It's amazing. It's going to be probably 3,000 or 4,000 people. You'll have some great speakers: Ravi Zacharias, J. Warner Wallace, Norman Geisler, Gary Habermas, Hugh Ross. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah, definitely. So excited about it, and I'm sure most of the people that are closest to me have definitely heard my enthusiasm, as I'm very excited.
Good. Well, hopefully it'll rub off on them and they'll come down. There's a lot to learn in a short period of time. 2 full days, Friday, Saturday, the 12th and the 13th of October.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great event. So if you do want to go, it is not too late, most certainly.
Nope, they can just go to ses.edu, click on conference, they'll see it.
Awesome. So, how would you rate your past week, on a scale of meh to mind-blowing?
Well, I'm getting weaker as I get older, but the week's been just fine. I just got back from Spartanburg. There was a college there called Spartanburg Methodist University. Just did I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist there this week, and did another event down in near Pinehurst, earlier in the week as well. And next week I'll be in Louisiana at a college down there. So getting out there a lot. I'd like to go to colleges because that's where there's a lot of atheism, a lot of skepticism. So whenever you call something I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, you're going to have atheists show up, and that makes it fun. Oh, yeah. In fact, last night when I was at Spartanburg Methodist College, we had a Muslim and a atheist ask questions during the Q&A, and people can see that entire video because we stream everything. If they go to CrossExamined.org and go to the homepage, they'll see the stream for that. You can just fast forward to the Q&A if you want to get to the fun part. It's also on our Facebook pages, CrossExamined.org and Dr. Frank Turek, Dr. Frank Turek.
I was tuning into that talk and really enjoyed listening to that.
Oh, good.
So what did you eat before recording with me today?
What did I eat?
What did you eat?
I had chicken noodle soup and toast for lunch. I know that sounds really exciting, but that's all I had. My wife made French bread and she toasted it. It was pretty good.
That's awesome. I love listening to this personally, one of my favorite questions to hear, hearing J. Warner Wallace just talking about how much he loves Thai food and all was quite interesting.
Did you have him on?
I did. I had him on 2 weeks ago, I believe.
What does he know? Doesn't know anything. I can't believe you had him on.
I know.
I have to tell him.
Definitely a great guy. I enjoyed talking with him. He's just a blast, and it was a lot of fun.
Good.
So, what's your favorite time of day? Morning, midday, evening, or night, and why?
Probably late afternoon, because I feel best late afternoon. That's when I usually work out. Like to go out for a run or a swim or something. So probably then. I'm not really a morning person. I'm more of a night person.
Gotcha. So
when people say, I get up for my quiet time at 6 a.m., I always say, well, it certainly is quiet in my house at 6 a.m. I'm not awake.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm more pushing the kind of the morning person type thing. I like to get up and get moving, but I hate to say it, like, it sounds weird because, I'm not too terribly old, but as I've, progressively gotten a little bit older, it's not shying away from morning person.
Yeah, well, some of the stuff I do is kind of evening. Like, for example, last night I was on this campus till almost 11 p.m., so I better be an evening person, because if I'm not, I wouldn't be very good at presenting to people in the evening.
That's true. So, what book have you most recently finished reading?
Most recently finished reading, well, Five Proofs of the Existence of God by Ed Feser. I'm always reading several books at one time, so I don't, I'm reading a new book by Larry Hurtado that has to do with the fact that the early Christians worshiped Jesus from the very beginning. What else do I got going here? I'm looking at my shelf because I got stuff in my Kindle that I can't think of right now, but I'm always reading, and sometimes I have several books going at once, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. So, of those, and I know this might be a broad question, of those books, other than the Bible, which book has impacted your life the most?
Well, probably Christian Apologetics by Norman Geisler, because that's the first book that I really read once I came to seminary. I mean, I read Evidence Demands a Verdict, More Than a Carpenter. I became a Christian by reading those books, so obviously they had a big impact. But in terms of thinking, in terms of evidence, probably Christian Apologetics, which was written way back in the 70s. And when I came to seminary, that was pretty much the first book we read.
Awesome. So that kind of concludes our awesome little segment, Quick Sip, to tie in with our coffee theme.
All right.
So we're kind of going to dive in, and we're going to focus in on your book, Stealing from God, which is absolutely just an awesome book. Love reading it. Have it on my Kindle app, so I take it wherever I go every day. So there's that, and it's awesome just to get to read and pull from that. So when it comes to writing, what inspired you to write your books, specifically Stealing from God?
Well, Stealing from God, I wrote primarily because it's frustrating watching atheists try and make arguments against God while they're using aspects of reality that would only exist if God existed. In other words, atheists make these arguments and they say there's no God, yet the arguments they're using and the aspects of reality they're using wouldn't exist unless God existed. They have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. I mean, one easy example is they'll say, well, there's too much evil in the world, so there can't be a good God. Well, all you need to do is ask them, what do you mean by evil? Now, they'll probably give you examples of evil. Well, murder's evil, rape is evil. No, I don't want examples. I want a definition. Now, once they try and define it, they will not be able to define it without reference to good, because evil doesn't exist on its own. Evil only exists as a lack or a privation in a good thing. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you've got a better body. If you take all the body out of the cancer, you got nothing. In other words, evil doesn't exist on its own. It only exists in a good thing. And so as soon as they admit there's evil, they're admitting there's good. But as soon as they're admitting there's good, they're admitting there's God, because what we mean by good is God's nature. Whoever God is, he is good. That's his nature. So when they say there's too much evil, and that means there is no God, they're presupposing God in order to say that. They're stealing from God to say he doesn't exist. They're stealing good from God to even know what evil is.
Right. So, like, the way that you format the book, which is kind of like the first half of the book, and I love this because it kind of you break up your chapters through an acronym, which is extremely helpful, and I love that. But you use the word crimes as a way to organize your book. And so the acronym stands for causality, reason, information, and intentionality, morality, and evil, which, like you just said, along with science.
Uh-huh.
So you kind of open each chapter with a quote. So the quote for causality is, "To doubt the law of causality is to doubt virtually everything we know about reality, including our ability to reason and do science. All arguments, all thinking, all science, and all aspects of life depend on the law of causality." So could you kind of sum up what causality is for those who might not have purchased your book and read it, which if you have not, I highly, highly suggest that you do, because we don't have nearly as much time in a short episode of this to break down as you do in your book, which is absolutely awesome.
Yeah. No, they're just going to have to get the book. I'm not going to say a word.
All right.
No, obviously the law of causality is that every effect has a cause. And that's the basis of science. You can't do science without assuming that every effect has a cause, because if effects can come into existence without causes, then science is undermined. Because what science tries to do, it tries to discover what particular effect or what particular cause caused a particular effect. And by the way, that's how we know God exists. We reason from effect to cause. We know that there's a creation, so there must be a creator. The effect is creation. The cause is a creator. We have a moral law written on our hearts, so there must be a moral lawgiver. The effect is the moral law. The cause is the moral lawgiver, i.e. God. So causality is just part of reality. And God set it up that way. He set up an orderly universe, so every effect has a cause. And that even is the case when we reason. For example, we'll take a classic syllogism, logical syllogism that people use to try and illustrate what logic is. The classic one goes like this: all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. And that particular syllogism only works if the law of causality works. Why? Well, in order for logic to go through, the premises of the argument, all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, have to have some sort of causal relationship to get to the conclusion, meaning Socrates is mortal. If there's no causal relationship, then the premises wouldn't result in the conclusion. I know this sounds a little bit philosophical, it is, but sometimes the reason I bring it up is sometimes I hear atheists saying, well, causality only applies to the physical world. In other words, all that exists are physical causes. No, that's not true. There are logical causes. There are immaterial causes. Premise A feeds into premise B, which results in conclusion C. All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So causality actually operates at a metaphysical level, meaning beyond the physical, not just the physical level. Yes, causality works at the physical level too. I hit a billiard ball into another billiard ball, and me causing one ball to hit another ball causes that ball to move. Yeah, that's physical causation, but there's also immaterial causation, like we just mentioned in the laws of logic.
Absolutely. And I think, like, the biggest thing that you use is you talk about the law of causality and how, like you said, that points to the fact that there is a God. And the biggest thing is that Christians often get accused of using God as an explanation, what they refer to as God of, you serve the God of the gaps.
Right.
And you say because of the law of causality, it actually points to a God. It's not, God is the conclusion. He's not the solution to our filling in the gaps.
Right. And typically atheists will accuse theists of saying, yeah, you're just putting a God in the gap of your knowledge. You used to think that, for example, say thunder was caused by the gods. Well, now we know it isn't. There's a natural cause. So you had this gap in your knowledge, and you said, I can't figure out a natural cause for it, so let me put God in there. And later we look bad because it wasn't really God directly. It was thunders. Thunder was caused by natural causes. And so they're always saying every time you suggest God is the cause that it's a God of the gaps argument. No, it's not. Why? Well, let me give you an example when it's not a God of the gaps argument. Even the simplest life form has a genetic code, or I should say a genome, a software program that's thousands of books long worth of information. In fact, in every one of our cells, there's a software program 3.2 billion letters long. All the letters are in the right order, save a mutation here or there. In other words, it's a long software program. It's like a message. Well, we know that messages always come from minds. They don't come from natural causes. If you're walking along the beach and you see John loves Mary in the sand, you don't say, well, the crabs did that, or the waves made that. You know there had to be an intelligent being, John or Mary, there to make that message in the sand, because nature doesn't create messages. Well, if nature doesn't create messages, even as simple as John loves Mary, well, there's got to be also an intelligent being that created the genome or the software program we all have. Now, we don't just lack a natural explanation when we see a message that long. It's not just that we go, well, we haven't figured out a natural cause for that. We have positive evidence for an intelligent being. Just like when you see John loves Mary in the sand, you don't just lack a natural cause. John loves Mary in the sand is actually positive evidence pointing to an intelligent being. And so it's not a God of the gaps argument. We're not just plugging an intelligent being into our gap. The very evidence we're looking at cries out for an intelligent being. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it kind of, that weaves into the point that if there's information, there's not going to be information just because it happened to be there. Is that this information was, that it was intentionally placed there, and that everything goes into the fact that it has a purpose and that there is an intentional aspect to everything.
Right. Exactly.
And so I think one of the neatest chapters to me is kind of talking about reason and how if atheism is true, then every single argument fails. Not just arguments for science or arguments for Christianity or arguments for whatever the case may be. Arguments for everything fails.
Right, of course, because if we're just molecular machines, as the atheists claim we are, if we're nothing but moist robots, how can we even reason? But we do reason, which means we're not moist robots. Because atheists think that everything's made of molecules and every thought you have is the result of a previous natural cause over which you have no control. In other words, you're completely governed by the laws of physics. You're a moist robot. Well, if that's the case, we shouldn't believe anything we think, including the thought that atheism's true. So that's the problem with atheism, is it makes reason impossible. And if reason's impossible, so is science. Because in order to do science, you got to be able to reason. So it's not Christians that are unreasonable, it's atheists that are unreasonable, because they have this ideology that shows that, or that suggests that we're just molecular machines, moist robots, and every thought we have is controlled by nature. Well, if that's the case, we shouldn't believe anything we think.
That's right. So, I mean, it's, the beauty of how all of it ties in, and as, as J. Warner Wallace puts it, it is all circumstantial evidence that points, that denies the fact that it's a God of the gaps, but rather points to the absolute evidence conclusion that there is a God, there is a theistic God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, there is. And it's a cumulative case for God. We don't just take one argument and say, oh, that's it, the God of Christianity exists. You got to make a cumulative case, and we do. For example, when you see all that information in a living thing, that doesn't get you all the way to Christianity. It just shows you there's got to be an intelligence out there. But when you combine that with other arguments, like the argument from the beginning of the universe, the argument from the design of the universe, the argument from morality, the argument from the fact that the resurrection occurred, these kind of things, then you realize that the being that created life is the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,985 years ago, Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the beauties of how your book is for every single person to read, not just if you're a Christian trying to defend your faith, or if you're an atheist, or if you're somewhere in between, or whatever it might be. When you kind of break down each one of these things, you're like, well, look, it points to the fact that there is in fact a theistic God. But most of the times you say, well, I'm not saying that it's the Christian God. We have, based on the evidence that I've provided, I haven't arrived at the Christian God. We have simply arrived at a theistic God.
Right. You get to the Christian God once you look at the evidence for Jesus, and you realize that Jesus rose from the dead, and therefore if Jesus rose from the dead, he's God, and whatever God teaches is true. So Jesus taught the entire Old Testament is the Word of God. So if the Old Testament or the New Testament's just reliable, telling us about what happened to Jesus, you get the Old Testament thrown in, and you realize that the true God is Yahweh.
Yeah, and I just love that, and I think it's something that it's a good tactic. It's a good thing to understand, is that when you're talking to somebody or you're discussing with somebody topics of this nature, you shouldn't be expecting for that person to jump from point A all the way to point Z.
That's right.
So I absolutely, I love that aspect of the book, and I think it's something that gets so gets overlooked, and is something that, if you overlook that topic, I think it's something that can come off as rather terrifying to a lot of young believers, or people that are like, look, I'm not good at explaining or talking or whatever the case may be. I think they put too much burden on themselves by kind of glancing over that fact. So,
glancing over what fact? What do you mean?
Glancing over the fact that you don't have to go straight from point A to point Z.
Right, yes. You make a cumulative case. No argument gets you all the way to Christianity unless you already know God exists and the resurrection is true. If you give evidence the resurrection is true, then you're at Christianity. But all these other arguments that just show you a theistic God exists, the argument from the beginning of the universe, the design of the universe, the design of life, morality, reason, all of these kind of arguments, they just show you that there must be some kind of theistic God out there.
Right.
And then you need more evidence to get to Christianity.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for, just for your time and pouring in to this podcast. I appreciate it so much. I wanted to challenge all of y'all that are listening. If you have not already picked up Correct, but not politically correct, and I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, or even legislating morality, I challenge y'all to go pick one up and start reading away. We can't just deny reading and growing our faith just because we have other things such as school or work or whatever the case may be, but we need to be in continual pursuit of strengthening our case for Christ. So, Doctor, I thank you so much for your time. It's just been a blast to have you on.
Well, thanks so much, Caleb. Keep doing what you're doing, and encourage some people to come down to the Apologetics Conference next week. And when you do, introduce yourself. Look forward to meeting you. And keep pursuing evidence and Christianity, and be a beacon out there for folks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. God bless.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in. That concludes our podcast today with Dr. Frank Turek. It was an awesome episode. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that y'all learned a bunch from it. I had a great time recording with him, and I learned a lot along the way, whether that's about the Christian faith, but also how to just put on a good podcast, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that I could take from this experience and learn from it going forward. So that's just something that I'm taking away from it and I'm learning from, and I hope that y'all are doing the same in whatever walk of life you're doing or whatever it is. I hope that you're learning from your experiences. So if you haven't already, go ahead and take the moment to subscribe to the podcast. That way you never miss out on an awesome episode. You don't know who we're going to be interviewing next, so I'm super excited for that. It's definitely just always an oddball of who you're going to get. It's definitely exciting to see who comes up. So go ahead and subscribe to that if you have not. Go ahead and check us out online at grounds4faith.com. That's grounds, 4, faith.com. And go ahead and subscribe to the blog right there. Also, if you haven't, check out our apparel page. We got our Grounds for Faith apparel out, and we'd love for you to check it out and support the ministry through that. We got hoodies, sweatshirts, t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, whatever you name it, we've got it. So hope y'all go check that out. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope y'all have a blessed one today.